We sat on the Galactic Council, then we burned the seat. The blade stopped one in from my throat. I did not move, I did not breathe. Tip of the curved knife was so close that I could see my own eye reflected in the dark metal. Around me the great hall of the Galactic Council had gone. Silent, 412 species, 2,000 witnesses. Every one of them watching to see if the human would die in his first hour on the floor. The creature holding the knife was tall and thin, wrapped in a black hood. Its 3 fingers held the handle with no shake. It had moved so fast that none of the guards had time to stop it. One moment I was walking toward my new seat. The next moment this thing was in front of me and the blade was at my neck. I am Adrian Vale. I am the first human ever to sit on the Galactic Council, and I had been on the floor of that chamber for less than 60 seconds before someone tried to end my life. The hooded creature spoke. Its voice was soft and dry like old paper. You should not be here, little human. The seat was not meant for you. Go home. Tell your people the stars are not for them. I did not answer. My years of training told me that any movement, even a word, could push the blade forward. Then a deep voice rang through the chamber. Stand down. The voice belonged to an old being who sat near the front of the hall. His skin was like dark wood, cracked and gray. His eyes were the color of dying stars. He was Kordesh Vex, the elder ambassador of the Drevani people. Of all the beings in that room, he was the only one who had shaken my hand the day before. He was the only one who had not flinched at the touch of human skin. This is not your matter, old one, the hooded creature said. It is the council's matter, Kordesh Vex said, and you are breaking the law of this hall. Lower the blade, Vithari, or I will call the guards to do it for you. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the hooded creature smiled. I could not see its face under the hood, but I felt the smile in my bones. It pulled the blade back. It folded the weapon into its sleeve. It stepped away from me. A warning, human, it said. Nothing more. Welcome to the council. It walked back to its seat as if nothing had happened. The hall began to breathe again. Whispers rose from every corner. The speaker, a long serpent-like being with 4 eyes, banged her staff 3 times and called for order. She did not look at me. She did not ask if I was harmed. She simply moved to the next item on the agenda, as if a knife had not just been pressed against the throat of the newest member of the Galactic Council. I walked to my seat. My legs did not shake, but only because I had ordered them not to. I sat down. I placed my hands flat on the cold, dark stone of the desk in front of me. I looked across the great, round chamber and I memorized every face, every shape, every hood, every smile. This was my first lesson. Humans were not welcome here. The session lasted 6 hours. I voted on 3 matters. None of them mattered. A trade dispute over a moon I had never heard of, a tax adjustment for a species I could not pronounce, a formal vote of thanks to the Vithari delegation for their generous donation to the council. Library, I voted yes on all 3. Because that is what every other new member did. I was watching, I was learning, I was waiting. When the session ended, I walked out of the chamber slowly. I crossed the great obsidian floor, passed under the 7 hanging banners of the founding species, and stepped through the tall doors into the long hallway. Vex was waiting for me there. He did not speak at first, he simply walked beside me. The tap of his wooden cane on the stone floor was the only sound between us. We walked past statues, older than my entire civilization. We walked past windows that looked out onto 7 moons hanging low in a violet sky. We walked until we reached a small garden where blue flowers grew under glass. Then he stopped and he turned to me. "You did well in there, young one." "I did nothing," I said. "I sat. I did not even defend myself." "That is what you did well." A weaker creature would have shouted. A foolish creature would have struck back. You were neither. You watched. You remembered. That is the only correct answer when a Vathari draws a blade. Why did they do it? He looked at me with those dying star eyes. He took a long breath. "Because they are afraid of you, Adrian Vale." I almost laughed. The Vathari controlled the trading routes of half the galaxy. Their fleets numbered in the hundreds of thousands. They had ruled the outer rim. For 10,000 years, my people had only just learned to travel between stars. We had no empire. We had a small blue planet and a few colonies and a dream of joining the wider community of life. Afraid of us, we are nothing. "You are new," Vex said. "You are loud, you are honest, you ask questions in a chamber that has not heard a real question in 4,000 years. The Vathari do not fear your ships, young one, they fear your mouth." We sat together on a bench under the glass. The blue flowers swayed in some unseen wind. Vex placed his cane across his knees. He looked very tired. "Tomorrow they will be polite to you," he said. "They will bow, they will smile, they will invite you to dinners. They will pretend the blade was a misunderstanding. You must accept all of it. You must drink their wine and laugh at their jokes. And then you will listen, you will learn the quiet rules, the rules that are not written down, the rules that decide who lives and who is forgotten." I nodded slowly. The garden was very quiet. "Vex," I said, "tell me one thing. The species who held this seat before us, the Mur and I, the records say they are gone. The records say a sickness took them 4,000 years ago. Is that true?" He did not answer for a long time. Blue flowers turned their faces toward the false sun above the glass. "Some questions," he said at last, "are not for the first day. Go to your rooms. Young one, sleep if you can. Tomorrow the real game begins." He stood up. He tapped his cane on the stone. He walked away through the garden. I sat on the bench for a long time. I did not sleep that night. In my quarters, I opened the sealed welcome packet that the council had delivered to my door. Inside were maps, names, schedules, and one thick file marked for my eyes alone. The file was the official history of my new seat, the seat that had once belonged to the Murren people. The file was 300 pages long. 290 of those pages were blank. Every line of real history had been removed. Stamped over each blank page were the same 5 words, sealed by order of the council. I read what little remained. The mere end. I had been a peaceful people. They had served on the council for 6,000 years before they vanished. Their home world was now called the Forbidden Zone, and any ship that entered its system would be turned away without warning. The cause of their end was listed simply as natural causes. I closed the file. I walked to the wide Window of my quarters, the 7 moons, hung above the horizon and far below them the lights of the great city, stretched out like a sea of stars on the ground. I thought about the blade at my throat. I thought about the smiling speaker who had not asked if I was harmed. I thought about the empty seat the mirror and I had left behind. I thought about Cordash Vex's tired eyes when I asked my question. And I thought about a small blue planet, very far from here, where 7 billion people were trusting me to be there. Voice. Behind me my message screen blinked. A new message had arrived. No sender name. No subject line. Only 3 short words. On the screen. You are watched. I did not turn off the screen. I left it glowing in the dark room. I walked back to the window. I placed my hand against the cool glass. Far above between the moons a small dark ship was moving very slowly across the violet sky. It carried no lights. It made no sound. It was watching the spire. It was watching my window. It was watching me. I lifted my hand from the glass. I smiled into the dark. Watch all you want, I whispered. I am watching too. I turned off the light. The next morning the polite war began. A messenger arrived at my door before sunrise. He was a small green creature in a silver robe, and he bowed 3 times before handing me a folded card. The writing on the card was in my own language, written in a careful hand. The Vithari High Lord Sasha Bren invites the human envoy Adrian Vale to a private dinner this evening in the Silver Hall of the 7th moon. Please accept our deep regret for yesterday's misunderstanding. A car will be sent at dusk. I read the card twice. Sasha Bren was the same Vithari who had ordered the blade against my throat. I knew it the way you know the face of a person who has wronged you. The hooded creature had walked back to that delegation, and Sasha Bren had been the one waiting for it. And now he was inviting me to dinner. I wrote my answer on the back of the card with my own pen, 3 short words. I accept gladly. The polite war had started, and in my chest, very quietly, the steady drum of a long and patient plan began to beat. I had not crossed the dark of space to bow to monsters. I had come to learn the rules of this place, and then when the time was right, I had come to break them. The dinner that evening changed my understanding of fear. The Silver Hall of the 7th moon was a beautiful place. The walls were polished metal that reflected the candlelight 1,000 times over. The table was long and narrow and made of a single piece of dark stone. 12 seats lined each side. At the head of the table sat the High Lord Sasha Bren. He was tall even sitting down. His skin was pale gray, the color of old ash. His eyes were small and black, and they did not blink. He wore a deep red robe with silver thread woven through it. When he saw me, he stood up. He spread his arms. He smiled. Adrian Vale, my new friend, please sit. Eat, drink, forget the unpleasantness of yesterday. A young guard acted without orders. He has been corrected. Tonight we begin again, you and I. I knew it was a lie. The hooded creature had not been a young guard, but I smiled. I bowed slightly. I sat in the chair he offered me. The wine was poured, the food was served, and the polite war began in earnest. For 3 hours, Sasha Breen was the most charming creature I had ever met. He told me stories of the old council. He praised the bravery of human explorers. He asked thoughtful questions about Earth's oceans, about our music, about our strange habit of keeping small furry animals as companions. He laughed at my answers. He filled my cup whenever it was empty. He treated me like a long-lost brother. And the entire time he was studying me, I felt his eyes measure every word I spoke. I felt his ears catch every pause, every breath. He was learning me. He was building a map of my mind so that one day when the moment came, he would know exactly where to push and where to pull. I let him build the map, but the map he was building was a false one. While he studied me, I was studying him, and I was a careful student. By the time the last course was cleared, I had learned 3 things about Sasha Breen that he had not meant to teach me. He hated Corvex with a deep and old hate. He believed I was simple-minded, and he was very, very afraid of something he would not name. That night back in my quarters, I sat at my desk and I wrote my first secret report to Earth. I did not send it through the Council channels. The Council read every message that passed through its network. I sent it instead through a tiny device hidden in my watch, a device that beamed a coded pulse to a small ship hidden the dead system 3 jumps from here. The ship would carry my message home through the long way, the slow way, the way that no Vithari sensor could touch. The message was short. The Council is not what we believed. The Vithari rule by quiet means. They have already tried to end my life. I will stay. I will learn. Send the second team. Begin Project Lighthouse. Tell the Directorate to prepare the Iron Pact. We will need friends here. I sent the message. I closed the watch. I turned off the lights. I did not know it then, but that small message was the first stone of the long road that would one day burn the heart out of the Galactic Council. The weeks that followed taught me the shape of the trap. I attended every session. I voted on every matter. I learned the names of every species in the chamber. I learned which delegations sat together at meals, which ones never spoke to one another, which ones bowed when a Vithari passed. In the hall, the pattern became clear very quickly. The Council did not govern. The Council managed. When a small species on the outer rim was raided by pirates, the Council issued a statement of concern. When a colony world was struck by famine, the Council promised to study the matter. When a trading fleet from a young civilization was boarded and its crew taken away, the Council voted that the matter was an internal affair of the local sector. Nothing was ever solved. Nothing was ever truly debated. Every important vote was decided before the chamber even opened in the quiet halls and silver dinners that happened the night before. And every important vote ended the same way. The Vithari got what they wanted. The smaller species nodded along. The few who tried to object were shouted down or reminded of old debts or simply replaced at the next election by a more agreeable face. I learned the names of the species who had been quiet for too long. The Dravani, Corvix's people who had once been a great civilization and were now slowly being squeezed out of their own trade routes. The Yellen, a gentle reptile species whose home world had been declared a protected zone, which meant the Vithari now controlled all access to it. The Benari, the Safari, the Kelvi, each one a story of a once proud people now bowing low to keep their place at the table. And then I learned the names of the species who were no longer there at all. The Muranai, the Othen, the Vels, the Krennic, the Droll, 5 species all gone In the last 4,000 years, each one had once held a seat on this council, each one had asked too many questions, each one was now a footnote in a sealed file. I started to write down everything. I kept a small notebook, paper not electronic, hidden in the lining of my coat. I wrote in a code that only my own people could read, names, dates, patterns, faces, the way Sasha Bren looked at the Yellen ambassador when she tried to speak, the way the speaker always called recess at the exact moment a difficult vote was about to happen, the way certain delegations always voted, in pairs, always in the same direction, always against the smaller species. Every night I wrote, every morning I burned the pages of the day before in the small fireplace in my quarters and started again. The notebook was for short-term memory. The real records were the messages I sent home in the watch. Earth was listening, Earth was learning with me. One evening, 6 weeks into my time on the council, Corvex came to my door. He looked older than I had ever seen him. His bark-like skin was darker and his cane shook a little when he walked. He came inside without speaking. He sat down in the chair by my window. He looked out at the 7 moons for a long time. I have been called home, he said, at last. Home to Drevana. The council has voted to send me on a long journey, a goodwill mission to a far system. I will be away for at least 2 years. I felt cold. I knew what this was. The Vithar had decided that Corvex was too friendly with me. They were sending him away and on a long journey through deep space. Many things could happen to an old ambassador. An accident, a failed engine, a pirate raid, a simple disappearance. You will not come back, I said. It was not a question. He smiled. The smile was tired and kind. Probably not, but that is not why I came tonight, young one. I came to give you a gift. He reached into his robe and pulled out a small wooden box. He placed it on my table. He did not open it. Inside this box is the truth about the Mur and I, everything I have gathered over my long life, the names of those who ended them, the methods they used, the proof that the council itself signed, the order. I have been keeping it for someone who would know what to do with it. I think that someone is you. I stared at the box. I did not touch it. Why me, Corvex? Why give this to a human you have known for 6 weeks? He looked at me with those dying star eyes, and for the first time I saw something in them that I had not seen before. Hope. Because in 6 weeks, he said, you have already done what no other young envoy has done in 4,000 years. You have noticed. He stood up slowly. He picked up his cane. Use it well, Adrian Vale, or do not use it at all. The choice is yours, but no. This, the day you open that box, is the day you stop being a guest in this council. It is the day you become its enemy. There is no path back from it. He walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the frame. One more thing. The mirror and I had a saying. Old fire forgets, new fire remembers. I have been old fire for a long time. It is your turn now. He left. I sat alone in my quarters for a long time, looking at the small wooden box on my table. The 7 moons rose. The 7 moons set. Somewhere out there a ship was being prepared to take Corvex on his long and final journey. Somewhere out there. Sasha Bren was smiling in his silver hull. I picked up the box. I held it in my hands. It was lighter than I had expected. I thought of Earth. I thought of 7 Billion people who had trusted me too. Come here and be their voice, I thought. Of the 411 species in the chamber, each one with their own 7 billion. I thought of the 5 empty seats, the 5 vanished people, the 5 sealed files. I thought of the blade that had touched my throat on my first day. I opened the box. Inside was a thin silver disc, no larger than my palm. On the disc in tiny letters in my own language were 3 words: watch and remember. I placed the disc into my reader. The screen lit up. The first image was the face of a Maronite child smiling, holding the hand of her mother. The second image was that same child 4 years older, lying still in a hospital bed. The disc held 3,000 hours of evidence. Names, faces, council records, Vathari, laboratories, engineered diseases, signed orders, bribes, threats, the slow, patient ending of an entire people, carried out across 200 years, all of it hidden behind the polite walls of the Galactic Council. I watched until the sun came up. I did not eat, I did not sleep, I did not stop. By the time the 7th moon had set the next morning, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to play the polite game for as long as it took. I was going to smile at Sasha Bren for as long as he needed me to smile. I was going to vote yes on every meaningless motion. I was going to be the harmless, easily managed human envoy that the Vathari believed me to be. And while I played that role, I was going to build something patient, something quiet, something that, when the day came, would not be stopped. The polite war was over. A new war had begun. Sasha Bren just did not know it yet. The morning after I opened the box, I went to breakfast in the great glass dining hall of the spire. I sat at my usual table. I ate my usual food. I greeted the same delegations I greeted every morning. I waved at Sasha Bren across the room, and he waved back with his warm and reasonable smile. But under the table in my pocket, my hand was wrapped around the silver disc. And every time I smiled, I was thinking of the Maronite child. Every time I laughed, I was thinking of the sealed files. Every time I bowed, I was counting the names that would one day be read aloud in front of the world. The harmless human envoy ate his breakfast. The patient builder of fires ate beside him. Only one of them was real, and only one of them planned to leave the spire alive. The next 3 years were the longest performance of my life. Every morning I woke up in my quarters in the spire, and I put on the mask of the cheerful, slightly slow, eager to please human envoy. I attended every breakfast. I accepted every invitation. I laughed at every joke. I drank the wine. I praised the food. I bowed at the right moments and looked confused at others. I was so harmless that within a year, the guards at the council door stopped checking my coat for hidden notebooks. Within 2 years, the Vathari delegation stopped sending watchers to follow me through the halls. Within 3 years, Sasha Bran invited me to his private chambers and called me his friend. He believed he had won me. He believed I had been tamed. I let him believe it. But every night, behind the locked door of my quarters, I became a different person. I sat at my desk. I opened the hidden compartment in the floor. I worked. The plan had 4 pieces. Each piece had to be built slowly in secret across many years. If any one piece was discovered, The entire structure would collapse and I would join the Murren I in the sealed files of the council archive. So I worked carefully, I worked patiently, I worked the way a farmer works a field, knowing the harvest is years away. The first piece was the Iron Pact. I could not move against the Vithar. Alone, Earth was strong, but Earth was new. We had a small fleet, a few colonies, and a stubborn people. We did not have the numbers to face the Vithar Empire on our own. We needed friends. We needed quiet friends. We needed friends who hated the Vithar as much as we did, but who had not yet found the courage to say so. I started with the Drevani, with Corvex gone. His daughter Linivex had taken his seat on the council. She was younger than her father, sharper-eyed, and she carried his hate inside her like banked fire. I went to her one evening in the same garden of blue flowers where her father had once spoken to me. I did not bring weapons. I did not bring promises of armies. I brought only one thing. I brought a copy of the silver disc. I gave it to her. I told her what it was. I told her where her father had wanted it to go. I told her that I was going to use it one day, but that I needed friends to stand with me when the day came. I told her she did not have to decide tonight. I told her she did not have to decide for a year, but I asked her when she did decide to remember what her father had said. Old fire forgets, new fire remembers. She said nothing. She took the disc. She walked away. 3 months later, a small unmarked package arrived at my quarters. Inside was a single dried blue flower from her father's garden. There was no note. There did not need to be. I had my first ally. Over the next 2 years, I gathered 11 more. The Yellen, whose home world had been taken from them under the lie of protection. The Benari, whose merchant fleets had been quietly bankrupted by Vithar trade rules. The Sathar, the Kelvi, the Hanner, the Vel, the Tor, the Isun, the Brahmin, the Quasi, and the Lothan, 12 species in total, including the Dravani, 12 junior members of the council, each of whom had lost something to the silent rule of the Vathari, each of whom had been waiting for someone, anyone, to suggest that maybe the rule did not have to last forever. I never met them all together. I never wrote a single document that listed them as a group. I met each of them alone in private gardens, in quiet chapels, in the empty corners of the great library, at the back of the spire. I told each of them only what they needed to know. Even now, after all of it, I do not believe any of the 12 knew the names of the other 11. The Iron Pact was a chain of trust, but each link only knew the link beside it. That was the first piece, friends. The second piece was Project Lighthouse. The council controlled every public communication channel in the galaxy. Every message, every broadcast, every news report passed through council relays. If I ever wanted to speak to the wider galaxy, to say a thing the Vathari did not want said, I could not use any of those channels. They would shut me down within a heartbeat. So we built our own. While I played the harmless envoy in the Spire, engineers back on Earth and on the human colonies in the belt and on Mars worked in secret. They built small relay buoys. Each buoy was no bigger than a household oven. Each buoy could broadcast on every council frequency at once. Each buoy was made to be hidden in the dead spaces between systems, in the cold orbits of empty rocks where no patrol ship ever went. The first buoy was placed 3 years before I would need it. The 100th was placed 18 months later. By the end of the third year, there were 642 lighthouse buoys scattered across the galaxy, all of them silent, all of them sleeping, all of them waiting for a single signal from a single man in a spire on a far violet world. When that signal came, every screen in the galaxy would light up, every speaker would sound, every channel the council controlled would carry a different message than the one the council intended. That was the second piece, voice. The third piece was the archive. The silver disc Corvex had given me was only the beginning. Over 3 years, dozens of allies and informants began to bring me more. A Drevani guard who had served at a Vathari laboratory, a Yellen clerk who had copied trade ledgers, a Benari scout who had mapped the slave routes of the Outer Rim, a retired council secretary who had kept her own private notes for 40 years. I gathered all of it, I sent all of it home. On Earth's moon, deep in a vault, under the gray dust, my people built the archive. It was a great hall of records, sealed against any attack, holding the truth of every wrong the council had hidden in 4,000 years. The archive could not be destroyed by any single fleet. It could not be hacked, because it was not connected to any network. And GT snorts. And GT, it could not be disputed because every record was paired with 3 independent sources. When the day came, the archive would be the proof that the Vathari had ended the Murani, the proof that the council had signed the order, the proof of every other quiet wrong of a people that had ever happened in this great hall. That was the third piece, truth. The fourth piece was the hardest. The fourth piece was the fleet. If the Vathari did not accept the truth, if they tried to silence us with force, when the day came, we needed to be able to defend ourselves, not to attack, not to conquer, only to survive long enough for the truth to spread. So while I smiled at Sasha Bran and drank his wine, my people built ships. They did not build them at Earth. They did not build them at any of our known colonies. They built them in the asteroid belt, in hollowed-out rocks, deep in the dust, in shipyards the council believed were mining stations. The council had inspectors who came every 6 months to check that we were following the trade rules. Those inspectors saw exactly what we wanted them to see. They saw mining drills. They saw ore shipments. They saw small docking bays for small mining ships. They did not see the great sealed bays deeper inside the rocks where 600 warships were being slowly, quietly, carefully assembled. The Ghost Fleet, we called it. By the end of the third year, it was almost ready. 4 pieces, friends, voice, truth, fleet. Each one built in shadow, each one ready when the time came. And while I built, Sasha Bran grew bolder. In the third year, the Vathari moved openly against the Drevani. They claimed a border incident on a Drevani colony. They demanded the council vote to authorize a peacekeeping intervention. Everyone in the chamber knew what those words meant: quarantine, slow starvation, the same playbook that had ended the Muranoi 4,000 years before. The vote was scheduled for the next session 2 weeks away. I sat in my quarters that night. I looked out at the 7 moons. I held the silver disc in my hand. This was the moment. This was the day Corvex had told me would come. I sent the signal To the Iron Pack, the message was a single word: ready. To the engineers at the lighthouse network, the message was 3 words: begin warm-up. To the Ghost Fleet hidden in the belt, the message was 5 words: move to forward positions. To the archive on the moon, the message was 6 words: prepare to broadcast on my mark. And to Sasha Breen, the next morning at breakfast, I smiled my warmest smile. I praised the bread. I asked about his family. I told him I was looking forward to the upcoming vote. I told him I planned to support the Vithari position, of course, as I always did. He laughed. He clapped me on the shoulder. He called me a wise young human. I laughed too. The trap was set. The actors were in place. The 4 pieces were built and ready. Now all that was left was to spring it. 2 weeks, 14 days, 14 mornings of polite breakfasts and meaningless small talk, while the largest quiet revolution in the history of the galaxy moved into position. 14 evenings of dinners and toasts, while lighthouse buoys came online one by one in the cold dark spaces between stars. 14 nights of staring at the 7 moons and wondering if I would still be alive at the end of it. I did not sleep much in those 2 weeks, but every morning I put on the mask. Every morning I bowed. Every morning I smiled. The harmless human envoy, the one who had been tamed, the one Sasha Breen had won. On the 7th night before the vote, something happened that almost broke the entire plan. A young human aide named Helen Carter, who worked in my office, came to me at 3:00 in the morning. Her face was white. Her hands were shaking. She closed the door of my quarters and locked it twice. "Sir," she said, "I think they know about one of the buoys. The Vithari security ship in Sector 12 has been holding position over an empty rock for 6 hours. They are running deep scans. The buoy is hidden under 50 m of dust, but if they keep scanning, they will find it." I felt my blood go cold. If the Vithari found one buoy, they would tear it apart. They would find the Earth made parts. They would know we had built a secret network. They would know exactly what was coming. The Iron Pact would be exposed. The Ghost Fleet would be hunted. Every piece of the plan would fall apart in days. I had a choice, 3 choices actually. I could send a signal to the buoy and tell it to wipe its memory before the Vithari cracked it open. That would save the secret, but it would leave a hole in the lighthouse network at the wrong moment. Or I could activate the network early, right now, and broadcast before they found anything. That would mean speaking before the Dravani vote, before the Iron Pact had its full alliance ready, before the moment was right. Or I could trust the third option, the hardest one. "Helen," I said quietly, "get me the schedule of Vithari fleet movements for the next 2 days now." She brought it to me. I studied it. There it was. A small Vithari supply convoy was passing within 4 jumps of that empty rock the next morning. Civilian ships lightly defended. They would stop to refuel at a small Vithari outpost. I did not want any harm done to civilians. I had built this plan for 3 years to keep the harm small, but I could pull a security ship away from a scan with a different kind of trick. "Send a coded message," I said, "to the captain of the security ship in Sector 12. Make it look like it came from Vithari High Command. Tell him a pirate threat has been reported near the supply convoy. Tell him to abandon his current Scan and move to escort the civilian ships to the outpost. Sir, if they trace that signal back to us, the whole network is exposed. They will not trace it. The signal will come from a relay we hid in their own communication pile 6 months ago. It will look like an order from their own command. They will follow it. Make sure the spelling is perfect. The Vithari are very careful about spelling in official orders. She nodded. She left. 2 hours later, the Vithari security ship in Sector 12 broke off its scan and jumped to the supply convoy's path. The buoy was safe. The convoy reached its outpost without trouble. No one was harmed. No one even knew anything had happened. I did not sleep at all that night. The next morning I was at breakfast when Sasha Breen sat down across from me. He was smiling, but his small black eyes were sharper than usual. Adrian, my friend, a strange thing happened in our fleet last night. A captain followed orders that no one in our high command remembers giving. Have you ever heard of such a thing? I made my face very puzzled. I shook my head slowly. I picked up my coffee. That sounds confusing. In Earth's old Navy, sometimes captains misread orders during long deployments. The lack of sleep can do strange things to a mind. Perhaps your captain simply made a small mistake. Will it cause much trouble? He watched me for a long moment. Then he laughed and waved his hand. No trouble. The captain was useful elsewhere. I only thought it was an interesting puzzle. He moved on to other topics. He never returned to it, but for the rest of that breakfast, I felt his eyes on me even when he was looking at his food. He did not know, but he was beginning to suspect. I had to move faster. I had only 7 days left, and now Sasha Wren was watching me again with those sharp black eyes. I could not let him put the pieces together before the vote. I doubled the pace. I met with the last 3 members of the Iron Pact in 2 nights instead of 4. I sent the final go codes to the Ghost Fleet captains. I told the archive on the moon to prepare every layer of its evidence for immediate release. I told Helen to prepare to leave the Spire and return to Earth on a fast civilian ship 2 days before the vote, so she would be safe when the storm broke. The day of the vote came. I dressed slowly. I did not put on diplomatic robes. I did not put on the cheerful colors I usually wore to council sessions. I put on a simple black uniform, the dress uniform of the United Earth Directorate, on my chest. Over my heart I pinned the small blue marble of Earth. I looked at myself in the mirror. I did not look like a harmless human envoy anymore. I looked like a man who had come a very long way for a very specific purpose. I smiled at the mirror. Old fire forgets, I said quietly. New fire remembers. I walked out of my quarters. I walked down the long hall. I walked under the 7 banners of the founding species. I walked across the great obsidian floor of the council chamber. 2,000 pairs of eyes turned to look at me. As I entered, Sasha Bren, sitting in his usual seat at the head of the Vithari delegation, looked up. He saw the black uniform. He saw the blue marble on my chest. He saw the look on my face. For the first time in 3 years, the smile fell off his face. I sat down at my desk. I placed my hands flat on the cold, dark stone. I waited for the speaker to call the session to order. The day had come. The speaker banged her staff 3 Times. The chamber settled into its familiar hush. The speaker's 4 eyes scanned the room. Her gaze passed over me, paused for half a heartbeat on my black uniform, and moved on. She did not understand yet. None of them did. They had 3 more minutes of not understanding, and then they would have a lifetime to understand. The council recognizes the motion brought by the Vithari delegation. The speaker said, the motion calls for a peacekeeping intervention in the Dravani border sector. The chair will hear arguments before the vote. Sasha Bren rose to his full height. He walked to the speaking platform in the center of the chamber. He spread his hands. He smiled his warm and reasonable smile. My fellow members of the council, this is a heavy day. None of us takes pleasure in what we must vote on, but the Dravani have failed to control their borders. Their citizens are suffering. The wider galaxy is at risk. We owe them our help, even when that help must be firm. He spoke for 10 minutes. It was a beautiful speech. It was full of words like duty and balance and protection. It contained no facts. It needed none. The vote had already been arranged in the Silver Halls the night before. Every important delegation had already been spoken to. The result was certain. Sasha Bran finished. He bowed. He returned to his seat. The speaker turned to the chamber. Are there other speakers before we move to the vote? I stood up. The chamber went very still. In 3 years on the council, I had never asked to speak before a vote. I had never asked to speak at all except when answering direct questions. The speaker's 4 eyes narrowed. The chair recognizes the human envoy. Please be brief, Adrian Vale. We have vote to conduct. I walked to the speaking platform. The walk was longer than it had ever been. 2,000 eyes followed me. I climbed the 3 steps. I placed my hands on the polished dark stone of the platform. I looked across the chamber. I found Sasha Bran's small black eyes. He was watching me with a careful and quiet attention. He still did not understand. Speaker, I said, my voice carried clearly through the great hall. Members of the council, I will be brief. I am here today to speak the truth. A small ripple of polite laughter ran through the chamber. Truth was an old word in this hall. It was a word people used in speeches like balance and duty. It was not a word that meant anything anymore. The laughter faded as I kept speaking. 3 years ago, I was new in this chamber. On my first day, a member of the Vathari delegation pressed a blade against my throat. I did not forget. I have spent every day since that day learning the truth of this place. Today, I am ready to share what I have learned. I lifted my hand. I held up a small silver disc. The chamber lights caught the metal. The species who held this seat before my own, the Murren I, the records say they died of natural causes 4,000 years ago. The records say their home world is now a forbidden zone, sealed by the council for safety. The records say nothing more. I paused. The records are lying. The chamber filled with whispers. Sasha Bren sat up very straight. His hand moved slowly under his desk. I knew he was reaching for a hidden communication device, calling for the guards. It did not matter. The guards were 3 minutes away. 3 minutes was all I needed. The Murren I did not die of any natural sickness, I said, my voice rising over the whispers. They were ended on purpose. The plague that took their children was made in a laboratory on Vithar I Prime. The order to release. That plague was signed by 12 members of this council, including 6 who are still in this chamber today. Their names are recorded on this disc. Their faces are recorded. The signed orders are recorded. Every part of the 4,000 lie is recorded. The speaker stood up. She raised her staff to bang for order. Her mouth opened. I did not let her speak. And speaker, I know you are about to silence this microphone, so before you do, I want every member of this council to understand one thing. I am not only speaking to this chamber today, I am speaking to every world in the galaxy. The speaker's mouth closed, her 4 eyes went wide. In that exact moment, 642 lighthouse buoys came online across the galaxy. Every screen in every city on every world the council touched lit up at once. Every speaker began to play. Every news channel was overridden. 200 billion sentient beings, from the busiest market on Vithari Prime to the smallest fishing village on a forgotten Yellen moon, suddenly saw the same image: a man in a black uniform with a blue marble pinned over his heart, standing at a speaking platform in the great chamber of the Galactic Council. They saw me, they heard me. My name is Adrian Vale, I said. I am the human envoy to the Galactic Council. I am speaking to you today from the chamber of the council itself. The council does not know I am speaking to you. They will try to stop me. Listen quickly. In the chamber, Sasha Breen rose to his feet. 3 Vithari guards in dark armor were already moving from the side doors. They were moving toward me. The speaker was banging her staff so hard the head of it cracked against the stone. Order, order, the microphone is cut. Guards, remove this envoy at once. The microphone was cut. The chamber speakers fell silent, but across the galaxy, every screen still showed me. Every speaker still played my voice. Lighthouse Network was carrying me directly, bypassing every council relay. I kept speaking. The species who held my seat before me, the Muranai, were not lost to sickness. They were ended by this council. So were the Authon, so were the Velis, so were the Krennic, so were the Drawl. 5 peoples, 5 empty seats, 5 sealed files. Every one of them ended because they asked the same question I am asking now. Why is this council allowed to choose who lives and who is forgotten? I held the silver disc higher. On this disc is the proof: every name, every order, every laboratory, every sign line. As of this moment, copies of this disc are also being released through every world's local news network. The full archive, 3,000 hours of evidence, is being made public on the open frequencies. You do not have to take my word for any of this. Look, read, see for yourselves. The Vithari guards reached the platform. The first one grabbed my arm. I did not resist. I let him pull me back from the platform. But the doors of the chamber opened. A line of Drivani soldiers walked in. They were tall, dark-skinned, armored in the green and silver of their homeworld. At the front of the line walked Lena Vex, her father's old cane in her hand, her father's old hate in her eyes. Behind her came Yellen warriors. Behind them came Benari, Sathari, Kelv, Henar, Vel, Tor, Isin, Brahmin, Quaza, Lothan. 12 species, the full strength of the Iron Pact. The Vithari guard stopped. They looked at the speaker. The speaker looked at the Vithari guards. The chamber fell into a silence so deep I could hear the candles burning in the wall sconces. Lena Vex walked to the center of the floor. She turned to the speaker. This human is under the protection of 12-member species. Speaker, he will not be removed by anyone. Not today, not ever. Step away from the platform. The speaker's mouth moved, but no words came out. I shook the guard's hand off my arm. I walked back to the platform. I picked up the microphone, even though it was no longer connected to the chamber speakers, even though it was not needed. The lighthouse was carrying my voice to every corner of the galaxy. The chamber speakers did not matter anymore. Outside in the orbit of the Council world, 600 unmarked warships dropped out of high jump. They did not fire. They did not approach. They simply hung there in formation in a wide ring around the planet. The Council world's defense fleet, the Great Vithari Guard fleet that had patrolled this system for 10,000 years, did not move to challenge them. The Vithari fleet captains had received orders 15 minutes earlier from their own home systems. Half of them had stand-down orders from Vithari nobles who had been quietly approached by the Iron Pact over the past year. The other half were simply outnumbered. Sasha Breen looked out the great chamber window at the ships in orbit. He turned back to me. The smile was completely gone now. His face was the color of cold ash. What have you done? He whispered. I have done nothing, I said. I have only spoken the truth. What happens next is the choice of every world that is listening. I am only the messenger. The archive is the message. I turned to the chamber, to the 412 species watching me, to the 2,000 witnesses in the Great Hall. This council was supposed to be a place where the peoples of the galaxy met as equals. It became something else. It became a stage where the strong decided the fate of the weak in private rooms, while pretending to debate them in public. It became a hall where 5 whole peoples were ended in silence, while their seats were quietly given to others. It became a lie. I looked at Sasha Breen. I do not stand here to take the Vithari's place. I do not stand here to make humans the new rulers. I stand here to tell every world in this galaxy that the rule itself is over, that the quiet wrongs are over, that the silent decisions are over. From this day forward, every species will speak for itself. Every species will know what is being done in its name. I lowered the microphone. The chamber was silent. For a long moment, no one moved. Speaker stood frozen on her platform. The Vithari guard stood still in the aisle. Sasha Brink sat with his hands flat on his desk, staring at me as if he had never seen me before. Then slowly, the Yellen ambassador stood up. She was a small reptile being with green scales and golden eyes. She had not spoken in the chamber for 19 years. The last time she had tried, she had been shouted down by the Vithari and reminded of the protected status of her home world. She had not raised her voice. Since she raised it now. The Yellen people withdraw from the Galactic Council, she said. Her voice shook a little, but it carried. We do not recognize the authority of anybody that signed the order against the Marani. We will go home to our protected world, and we will reopen our ports tomorrow morning. Any species that wishes to trade with us as equals, send your ships. We will welcome them. She bowed once to the chamber. She walked out the side door. Her aides walked behind her. The Benari ambassador stood up next. The Benari people also withdraw. then the Sathari, then the Kelvi, then the Hinar, then the Vel, then the Tor, then the Isin, then the Brahmin, then the Kizai, then the Lothan, then the Dravani, with Lena Vex bowing deeply to me as she led her delegation out. Then species after species I had not even spoken to in the Iron Pact began to stand. And GT snorts. And GT, 40 more in the first hour, 100 more by end of the day. Each one rose, said a few quiet words, and walked out the side door, never to return. The Vathari delegation stayed, so did 14 of their oldest allies. Together they made up about 30 species sitting in a chamber built for 400, the empty seats stretched around them in every direction. The speaker finally found her voice. She banged her broken staff weakly against the stone. This session is suspended. We will reconvene in 3 days to consider the situation. She walked off her platform. She did not look at me as she passed. Her 4 eyes were fixed on the floor. I climbed down from the speaking platform. I walked across the great obsidian floor. I walked toward the side door where the others had gone. Sasha Brin stood up as I passed his delegation. He blocked my path. The two of us stood face to face for the first time without any masks at all. You were a guest, he said. You ate at my table, you drank my wine, you smiled at my children, and you were planning this the whole time. Yes. For 3 years. Yes. He stared at me for a long time. I could not read what was in his small black eyes, anger, disbelief, maybe even somewhere underneath it all, a small and grudging respect. You will regret this, Adrian Vale. Vathari are not finished. We have ruled for 10,000 years. We will not fall to one speech and a handful of broken alliances. I shook my head slowly. I was tired. I had not slept in 2 days. I was not afraid of him anymore. You have already fallen, Sasha Brin. You just have not noticed yet. Go home. Look around your home world tomorrow morning. Count how many ships are still in your ports. Count how many friends still answer your calls. Count how many of your own captains are still taking your orders. The Vathari Empire ended 10 minutes ago. You are only the last to know. I walked past him. I walked out the side door. Outside the chamber, in the long hallway, under the 7 banners, the air felt different, lighter, as if a great weight that had hung there for 10,000 years had been lifted in a single afternoon. I walked to my quarters. I closed the door. I sat down on the edge of my bed. For the first time in 3 years, I let myself shake. The trap was sprung. The truth was loose. The polite war was finished. The honest one had begun. And the great hall of the Galactic Council, which had stood unchanged for 11,000 years, would never look the same again. The honest war lasted 18 months. It was not a war of fleets in the end. It was a war of choices. Every world that had heard my voice on the Lighthouse Network had to make one. They had to choose whether to keep believing the polite lies of the Council, or whether to believe the evidence that was now playing on every screen. They had to choose whether to keep paying their taxes to a council that had ended 5 entire peoples, or whether to stop. They had to choose whether to keep accepting Vathari protection, or whether to close their ports. World by world, system by system, the choices came in. The Dravani closed their ports first. Within 48 hours of my speech, every Vithari ship in Dravani space had been ordered to leave. The ships left peacefully. The Vithari did not have the strength to force any response because half their fleet had already chosen not to follow orders. The Yellen closed their ports next, then the Benari, then the Sathari. Within a week, every member of the Iron Pact had cut its trade with the Vathari core systems. Within 2 weeks, 80 other species had joined them. Within a month, the count was over 200. The Vathari Empire did not fall in fire. It fell in silence. World after world simply stopped sending taxes, stopped accepting Vathari ships, stopped recognizing Vathari authority. The Vathari nobles in the core systems found their bank accounts shrinking, their fleets unable to refuel, their food supplies cut off. Within 6 months, Sasha Bren's own home world declared its independence from the Vathari throne. Within a year, the Vathari throne itself was empty. The Vathari nobles were running their own home worlds now as small powers. Among many, no longer the silent rulers of half the galaxy. There were a few hard moments. 3 Vathari fleet groups in the Deep Rim refused to accept the new reality. They tried to take over a small trading station in a neutral system. The Ghost fleet moved to block them. The standoff lasted 4 days. In the end, no shots were fired. The Vathari captains, looking at the numbers and at the news playing on every screen across the galaxy, lowered their weapons and surrendered the station. They were allowed to return home with their crews intact. I had insisted on that in every order I sent. I had not built this revolution to add new names to the lists of the lost. I had built it to stop the lists from growing. The council itself collapsed slower. The speaker tried to hold sessions for 3 weeks after my speech. Each session, fewer delegations came. By the end of the 3rd week, only the Vathari and 4 of their oldest allies were still attending. Then those 4 left too. The speaker held a session alone for 1 full hour, banging her staff at empty seats before she finally walked out of the chamber and never returned. I stayed in the spire through the 18 months. I watched it empty. I watched the great obsidian floor go quiet. I watched the 7 banners of the founding species come down one by one, taken home by their delegations. I watched the silver halls go dark. I watched the gardens of blue flowers grow wild without their keepers. I did not feel triumph. I felt the long, deep weariness of a job that was almost done. There was one thing left to do. In the 18th month, the surviving member species of the old council called for a final meeting. They wanted to decide what would replace the council. Some wanted a new council, smaller, with new rules. Some wanted no council at all. Some wanted to ask Earth to take the speaker's seat. That last suggestion made me very tired. Indeed, the meeting was held in the same great chamber where I had given my speech. The chamber had been cleaned and the broken stone of the speaker's platform repaired. The 7 banners had been put back, plus 5 new ones for the Murani, the Afen, the Vels, the Krennic, and the Drow. The empty seats of the lost peoples were marked with small white flowers. Their names were carved into the floor. At the foot of the speaking platform, I walked into that chamber for what I knew would be the last time. Linevex met me at the door. She had become the leader of the Iron Pact in the months after my speech. She was tired too, but her eyes were brighter than I had ever seen them. "They will offer you the speaker's seat today," she said quietly. Most of the species want it. They believe humans should lead since humans were brave enough to speak the truth. I know they will. And what will you say? I smiled. I touched her shoulder the way her father had once touched mine. Watch. I walked across the great obsidian floor. 2,000 witnesses had come back for this final meeting. 327 species. The 5 empty seats with their white flowers. The 5 new banners for the lost peoples. I walked until I stood at the foot of the speaking platform. I did not climb it. The acting speaker, an old yelling matron with kind eyes, called the meeting to order. She turned to me. Adrian Vale of Earth, the members of this assembly have voted by a count of 298 to 29, with the others abstaining. The assembly offers you the speaker seat. We ask you to lead a new council. We ask humans to take the role that the Vithari once held, but to hold it with honesty instead of lies. Will you accept? The chamber was silent. 327 species watched me. I drew a long breath. I shook my head. Slowly. I will not accept. A murmur ran through the chamber. The acting speaker leaned forward. Her kind eyes were puzzled. You refuse the seat. I refuse the seat. I refuse the council, and I'm here today to ask all of you to refuse it too. The murmur grew louder. I lifted my hand. The chamber waited. I have thought about this for many months. I have spoken with my own people. On Earth we are agreed. The problem with the old council was not the species who sat on it. It was the seat itself. It was the idea that one body in one chamber should decide for every world in the galaxy. That idea always ends the same way. The strong species use the seat to rule the weak ones. The seat becomes a throne. The throne becomes a lie. We have just spent 18 months ending one such lie. I will not begin a new one. I walked up the 3 steps of the platform. I turned to the chamber. From the day my people first looked up at the stars, we dreamed of joining the wider galaxy as equals, not as servants, not as masters, as equals. We came here 3 years ago hoping to find that. We did not find it. We found a great hall full of polite lies. We did not come here to take the seat at the head of those lies. We came here to set you free of them. I reached into my coat. I pulled out a small device. It was a simple plasma cutter, the kind used by engineers and miners across the galaxy. It hummed quietly when I switched it on. I walked across the platform. I walked up to the great speaker's chair, the chair where the Vithari speaker had sat for the last 3,000 years, and 12 other speakers had sat before her. The chair from which 5 peoples had been quietly ended, the chair I had now been offered. I lit the cutter. I cut the speaker's chair into 3 pieces. I cut those 3 pieces into smaller pieces. I cut the smaller pieces into nothing. I cut until there was only molten slag puddles on the obsidian floor of the council chamber, glowing red against the dark stone. I switched off the cutter. The chamber was completely silent. I turned back to the 327 species. There is no speaker anymore, I said. There is no council. There is no seat. From this day forward, every species will speak for itself. Every world will trade with whom it chooses. Every people will be heard in its own voice. If 2 species have a quarrel, they will speak to each other directly like adults. If many species have a common matter, they We'll gather as equals in a circle with no chair at the head. We do not need a council to be a galaxy. We only need each other. I let the silence stretch, then I said the last words I would ever speak in that great hall. Earth will not lead you. Earth will not rule you. Earth will trade with you and travel with you and stand beside you. When monsters return as monsters always do, but we will not sit in any throne. We have seen what thrones do. We have seen the empty seats and the white flowers. We do not want any more of those. I walked off the platform. I walked across the great obsidian floor for the last time. I passed the puddle of cooling slag. I passed the names carved in the stone. I passed Lena Vex, who had tears in her bright eyes and was smiling. All the same, I walked out the tall doors. I walked down the long hallway. I walked under the 7 banners and the 5 new ones. For the lost peoples, I walked to the small garden where the blue flowers still grew under glass. I sat on the bench where Corvix had once sat with me on my first day. I sat there for a long time. The 7 moons rose, the 7 moons set. Eventually, Lena Vex came and found me. She sat down beside me without speaking. The blue flowers swayed in their unseen wind. They are going to do it, she said. At last, after you left, they argued for hours, but in the end they voted. There will be no new council. There will only be a circle when matters need a circle. They will gather, as you said, as equals. I closed my eyes. I felt the long weariness lift just a little. Then it is done. It is done. What will you do now, Adrian? Vale. I thought about it. I thought about Earth, the small blue marble pinned over my heart for 3 years. I thought about the long road home. I am going to go home, I said. I am going to walk on grass. I am going to sit by the sea. I am going to forget the smell of these halls for a little while. And then when I am rested, I am going to do whatever small work my people still need from me. She nodded. She placed her hand on mine. My father would have liked you very much. I liked him very much. He used to say something, the mayor, and I had a saying, old fire forgets, new fire remembers. He always said the day would come when new fire would remember loud enough that old fire could finally rest. I smiled. I looked up at the 7 moons. Did the new fire remember loud enough? She laughed. It was a soft laugh, but it was the first real laugh I had heard from her in a year. Adrian Vale, you burned the seat in front of 327 species. Yes, the new fire remembered loud enough. I went home the next morning. The journey took 3 weeks. When my ship dropped out of jump above Earth, I stood at the great window and I looked at my small blue planet, and for a long time I did not say anything. The clouds turned slowly over the oceans. The night side glowed with 1,000 cities. A small white moon hung beside it, bright and patient. Below on the surface, my people were waiting. They had heard the broadcasts. They had read the archive. They had watched me cut the speaker's chair. They were ready to welcome me home with parades and speeches and medals and all the small, loud noises of a proud world. I knew I would have to walk through all of that. I would smile at the cameras. I would shake the hands. I would say the right words. But for that one quiet moment, alone at the window of my ship, I just looked at the blue planet. I thought about the Muranite child in the silver disk, smiling, holding her mother's hand. I thought about Corvix in his garden of Blue flowers. I thought about Sasha Brink, who was still alive somewhere on a small home. World he no longer ruled, eating ordinary food, sleeping ordinary sleep. No longer feared by anyone. I thought about the slag of the speaker's chair cooling forever on the obsidian floor of an empty chamber. I thought about the new fire which had remembered. I am Adrian Veal. I sat on the Galactic Council. Then I burned the seat. And I went home.